At my own son's lavish wedding, dressed in my best thrift store find, I watched him toast his new in-laws, praising them as his only family. Then, he pointed at me, his mother, and snarled, "Leave now, fat pig." My legs shook, but a strange calm settled. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. Follow my story, like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. The grand ballroom of the Thorne estate shimmered under 1,000 crystal facets, a dazzling spectacle of wealth and extravagance. Marble floors gleamed, reflecting the soft glow of gilded chandeliers, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and fine perfume. Every guest seemed to float effortlessly through the opulent space, adorned in designer gowns and sharp tuxedos, their laughter echoing with an easy confidence. Eleanor Vance, however, felt less like floating and more like sinking. Her simple, floral print dress, a lucky find from a thrift store, felt like a beacon of poverty in this sea of riches. It was clean, carefully pressed, and the closest she could get to festive, but compared to the silken elegance surrounding her, she might as well have been wearing rags. Her worn, sensible shoes pinched slightly, a constant reminder of her place, or lack thereof, in this new, glittering world her son, Ethan Thorne, now inhabited. She felt like a stray dog that had accidentally wandered into a palace, acutely aware of every judging glance, every whispered comment that might be about her. It had been years since Ethan truly looked at her, really saw her. The distance between them had started subtly, a gradual widening of a chasm that began with his ambition and solidified with his engagement to Cassandra Hayes. Eleanor had only met Cassandra twice, brief, uncomfortable encounters where Cassandra's disdain was palpable, a thinly veiled sneer accompanying every polite, insincere word. Cassandra saw her as an embarrassment, a relic from a past Ethan was desperate to shed, and Ethan, under Cassandra's influence, had become a stranger, a polished, aloof version of the warm, loving boy Eleanor had raised. Their conversations became shorter, more transactional, until they dwindled to almost nothing. As the wedding march began, Eleanor felt a familiar ache in her chest. Cassandra, radiant and regal in a gown that must have cost more than Eleanor's entire annual income, glided down the aisle. Ethan, standing at the altar, looked impossibly handsome, his face a mask of confident joy. A tear slipped down Eleanor's cheek as she watched him, remembering the gap-toothed grins, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories. The boy who would run to her with open arms, his voice full of unconditional love. That boy was gone, replaced by this poised, distant man who barely acknowledged her presence. It was a beautiful ceremony, a picture-perfect union. Yet for Eleanor, it was a funeral for the son she once knew. After the vows, a flurry of ushers directed guests to their tables. Eleanor braced herself, a hollow feeling in her stomach. She located her name card, placed at table 17, tucked away in a corner near the kitchen entrance. Eleanor Vance. Her name was misspelled, a small, yet significant sting, an indication of how little thought had gone into her inclusion. She was an obligation, an afterthought. From her secluded vantage point, she watched Ethan and Cassandra at the opulent head table, surrounded by the Hayes family and their glittering circle. They laughed, they toasted, they exchanged intimate glances, an untouchable tableau of happiness. Soon, the clinking of a fork against a champagne flute signaled the start of the toasts. Ethan stood, smooth and confident, a microphone in hand. Eleanor's heart gave a hopeful flutter. Perhaps, despite everything, he would offer some small acknowledgement. Some word, however brief, for the woman who had brought him into the world, who had sacrificed everything for his future. Ethan's voice, amplified by the speakers, filled the ballroom. "I want to thank everyone for celebrating this incredible day with Cassandra and me," he began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, carefully avoiding table 17. He spoke eloquently, praising Cassandra's beauty, her intelligence, her grace. Then he turned, a broad smile fixed on his face, to Cassandra's parents, Frederick and Victoria Hayes. "And to Frederick and Victoria," he continued, his voice overflowing with genuine warmth. "Thank you. Thank you for your unwavering support, your wisdom, your guidance. You have welcomed me into your family with open arms, and you have shaped me into the man I am today. You've shown me what true family means." He raised his glass, a gesture mirrored by Cassandra, who beamed beside him. "To the Hayes family," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "The only family who truly supports me and makes me happy." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade, descending slowly, deliberately. The only family. Eleanor felt a cold dread seep into her bones. It wasn't just a slight, it was a public execution of her motherhood, a complete erasure of her existence in his life. The ballroom erupted in applause, a thunderous roar of approval for his cruel sentiment. Cassandra, her eyes sparkling, leaned in and kissed Ethan's cheek, a triumphant gesture that seemed to mock Eleanor directly. For a fleeting second, Ethan's eyes met hers across the vast expanse of the room. A flicker, so brief she couldn't decipher it. Was it regret? A momentary crack in his hardened facade? Then, his expression tightened, his jaw visibly clenching, and whatever fragile hope had sparked within Eleanor was extinguished. He lowered his glass, his gaze still fixed on her, though his smile was gone. His voice dropped slightly, losing its earlier warmth, becoming sharp, precise, and utterly venomous. "And you," he said, pointing a finger directly at her, a gesture that drew every eye in the room to table 17. "You can leave now, fat pig." The applause died instantly, replaced by a suffocating silence. The air crackled with shock and disbelief. All eyes, now, were on Eleanor. The whispers started, a low, insidious hum, like a swarm of angry bees. Her legs trembled uncontrollably, threatening to give out beneath her. The carefully wrapped gift bag, containing a handmade quilt she had spent months stitching for him, slipped from her numb fingers and landed with a soft thud on the marble floor. The sound echoed in the sudden quiet, a pathetic punctuation mark to her humiliation. She had to get out. Every nerve ending screamed for escape. Blindly, she pushed back her chair, scraping it harshly against the floor, a sound that seemed deafening in the silence. Her vision blurred with unshed tears, her cheeks burning with shame. She stumbled forward, a graceless, desperate retreat toward the exit, feeling the weight of 100 stairs burning into her back. The grand doors felt impossibly far away. Just as she reached the threshold, a clear, resonant voice cut through the stunned silence. "Wait." Eleanor froze, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She didn't dare turn around. Her heart hammered against her ribs, convinced this was some further degradation awaiting her. But then, footsteps approached, firm and deliberate. A shadow fell over her. "Eleanor Vance?" An older man's voice, deep and kind, asked gently. She finally turned, her eyes cautiously lifting to meet his. He was impeccably dressed, with silver hair and warm, intelligent eyes. A faint smile touched his lips. "It is you. I recognize you immediately." Eleanor stood frozen, the old man's words a lifeline in the suffocating silence. He was a beacon in the opulence, his presence commanding, yet his gaze toward her was profoundly gentle. He turned to face the entire room, his voice gaining power, cutting through the stunned murmurs that had begun to rise. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying easily without the need for a microphone, "this woman, Eleanor Vance, is a guest of honor here today. Though I suspect many of you, perhaps even some at the head table, don't truly know her." His eyes lingered pointedly on Ethan, then on Cassandra, before sweeping over the rest of the silent, aghast crowd. He then turned back to Eleanor, offering her a reassuring smile before addressing the room once more. "My name is Arthur Sterling," he stated, and a ripple of recognition, quickly turning to awe, spread through the room. Sterling Industries, a titan in several markets, a name synonymous with power and immense wealth. Eleanor, in her state of shock, barely registered the murmurs. 15 years ago, Arthur continued, his voice now imbued with a solemn gravity. "My company, Sterling Industries, was teetering on the edge of collapse. We were losing contracts, our stock was plummeting, and bankruptcy loomed large. I was desperate, working late into the nights, trying to salvage what I could. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle before his gaze returned to Eleanor. He gestured to Eleanor with an open hand. This woman saved us. A collective gasp went through the room. Eleanor felt a flush creep up her neck. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the marble floor. This was not how she wanted her life, her sacrifices, to be revealed. Especially not like this, in front of everyone, as a weapon against her son. Arthur began to tell their story, his voice a steady narrative thread. It was past midnight. I was in my office, staring at mountains of debt, convinced all hope was lost. My cleaner, a quiet, diligent woman, was still there, meticulously scrubbing the floors. That woman was Eleanor. He explained how he had poured out his heart to her, a stranger, confessing his fear of losing everything, of 300 people losing their jobs. She listened, Arthur recounted, without judgment. And then, she shared her own story. Not with pity, but with a quiet strength that humbled me. She told me she was working 3 jobs, day and night, barely sleeping, just to put her son through school. Arthur's eyes, now filled with a deep respect, met Eleanor's. She spoke of dignity, of responsibility, of trusting in the process. Even when the path was hard, he explained how Eleanor's simple, heartfelt words, her unwavering belief in honest work and quiet perseverance, had pierced through his despair. Her quiet determination, her fierce belief in providing for her son, it ignited something in me. It reminded me of what truly mattered, of the human cost beyond the balance sheets. It inspired me to restructure, to fight for every single one of those 300 jobs. Arthur's voice swelled with emotion. And because of Eleanor Vance, Sterling Industries didn't just survive, we thrived. Today, we are valued at over $400 million, and those 300 jobs became 3,000, all because of the wisdom of a cleaning lady. He then revealed another detail that tightened the knot in Eleanor's stomach. When the company recovered, I offered Eleanor a position on the executive team, a role befitting her incredible insight and work ethic. She politely, but firmly, refused. She told me she just wanted to continue working, honestly and diligently, to support her son's dreams. Arthur then turned his piercing gaze directly to Ethan, who stood frozen at the head table, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. Cassandra, beside him, looked as though she might shatter. And your son, Arthur's voice was now sharp, imbued with an undeniable fury, just called you a fat pig. Ethan, finally rousing from his stupor, took a step forward, his mouth opening as if to protest, to interrupt the flow of revelation that was dismantling his carefully constructed world. Mr. Sterling. But Arthur cut him off, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Don't you dare interrupt me, young man. You think you know your mother? You think you know the sacrifices she made? He swung his arm out, indicating Eleanor. For 8 years, Eleanor worked 3 jobs, 7 days a week. Night janitor for me, day seamstress in a small shop downtown, and weekends she was a prep cook at a diner near the bus station. 8 years straight. The silence returned. Heavier this time, punctuated by the faint clinking of cutlery dropped onto plates. Everyone in the ballroom seemed to hold their breath, hanging on Arthur's every word. 3 jobs, 7 days a week, for 8 years straight, Arthur repeated, his voice resonating with an unshakable conviction. To ensure you, Ethan Thorne, had a debt-free education. To ensure you had every opportunity to achieve the success you now flaunt so cruelly. While you were studying, attending prestigious universities, building your empire, she was scrubbing floors, mending clothes, and chopping vegetables, fueled by nothing but the unwavering hope that her son would make something of himself. Eleanor felt the full, crushing weight of every eye in the room. The exposure of her hidden life, the raw truth of her struggle, laid bare for all to see, burned her more than any insult. She wished, desperately, that Ethan had never learned this truth. At least not this way. Not as a public shaming. It felt like a betrayal of her own quiet dignity. The dignity Arthur himself had praised. Arthur reached out, his hand gently squeezing hers. "Eleanor, please, stay. You deserve to be celebrated," but Eleanor couldn't. The ballroom, once a symbol of her son's achievement, now felt like an arena where her heart had been torn out and dissected. The shame, the humiliation, the sheer nakedness of her sacrifice was too much to bear. She pulled her hand gently from Arthur's grasp, bent down, and retrieved her fallen gift bag, clutching it to her chest like a shield. Without a word, she turned and walked, her head held high despite the tremors in her legs, towards the exit. "Mom! Wait!" Ethan's voice, small and broken, barely a whisper, floated across the cavernous room. Eleanor didn't turn back. She couldn't. Each step took her further from the glittering lights, the stunned faces, the man who had once been her son. She pushed through the heavy doors and descended the grand staircase, her old Honda, faithful and unremarkable, waiting for her in the vast, empty parking lot. Sliding into the driver's seat, she fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking. As the engine sputtered to life, the dam finally broke. Tears, hot and bitter, streamed down her face, blurring her vision. The humiliation, the exposure, the raw pain of Ethan's words, the final, undeniable proof of his abandonment, it all crashed over her. She gripped the steering wheel, sobbing into the quiet darkness of her old car, miles away from the wedding that had shattered her world. The quiet of her small San Angelo apartment pressed in on Eleanor, heavier and colder than the night air. Sleep was an impossible luxury. Every time she closed her eyes, Ethan's face materialized, contorted in that sneer, as he spat "fat pig," followed by Cassandra's smug, satisfied smirk. The words replayed endlessly, a cruel, broken record in her mind, each repetition twisting the knife deeper into her already raw heart. She tossed and turned in her narrow bed, the threadbare blanket offering no comfort against the chill that had settled deep within her soul. Her phone lay on the bedside table, a silent, mocking testament to her solitude. She had half expected it to ring, to be Ethan, perhaps calling to apologize, to explain, to offer some semblance of comfort. But the screen remained dark, a stark reminder of the chasm that had opened between them. It confirmed what she already knew. In his new, glittering life, she was an inconvenient truth, a past to be erased. At 6 a.m., the first sliver of dawn bled through the blinds. Eleanor pushed herself up, her body aching, her mind exhausted. Her hands trembled as she brewed a cup of instant coffee, the cheap scent doing little to awaken her. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt suffocating. Every familiar object seemed to mock her, silent witnesses to her humiliation. She felt trapped, exposed, even in her own small space. Driven by an instinct she couldn't name, Eleanor walked to her closet. On the top shelf, tucked away behind old linens, was a battered shoebox. She pulled it down, the cardboard worn smooth from years of handling. Inside, nestled beneath a faded drawing Ethan had made in kindergarten and a curled photograph of them at a local fair, were stacks of meticulously organized pay stubs. Years of them. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, the shoebox in her lap, and began to sift through the papers. Each slip of paper was a tangible record of her sacrifice. Her work week typically stretched to 95 hours. After taxes, her combined income from her 3 jobs, night janitor at Sterling Industries, day seamstress at Mrs. Henderson's Alterations, and weekend prep cook at the Highway Diner, amounted to a meager $2,400 a month. From that, every single penny beyond her most basic survival had gone to Ethan. His college rent, tuition fees, textbooks, even a small allowance so he wouldn't feel completely deprived among his wealthier peers. She remembered the calculations, etched into her memory like scripture. Rent for her tiny apartment was $500. Utilities, $150. Food, a weekly $30 budget for rice, beans, and day-old bread. She cut her own hair with kitchen shears, patched her clothes until they were threadbare, and walked everywhere to save on bus fare. A doctor's visit was an unimaginable luxury, a financial catastrophe waiting to happen. She had perfected the art of making nothing last forever. All so Ethan could have a different life. She had told him she worked an easy office job, with flexible hours, so he wouldn't worry. She'd always managed to sound cheerful, despite the bone-deep fatigue that became her constant companion. She'd lied about her weariness, brushed off his occasional questions about her seemingly endless energy. She wanted him to focus on his studies, to build a future unburdened by her struggles. She wanted him to have the life she never could. It had been her secret, her burden, and her greatest joy. The silence of the apartment was finally broken at 10:30 a.m. by the jarring ring of her phone. Ethan. Her heart leaped, then sank, a strange mixture of dread and longing. "Mom?" His voice was strained, unfamiliar, almost pleading. Is it true? What Arthur Sterling said? Eleanor closed her eyes, a sigh escaping her lips. The truth, in all its raw, painful glory, was out. "Yes, Ethan," she confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. "It's all true." She paused, gathering her strength. "I did it because I loved you. I wanted you to have a chance, a good life. I wanted you to build something for yourself without debt, without the struggles I had." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, Ethan spoke again, his voice flat. "Loved me?" The past tense hung in the air, a subtle but piercing accusation. Eleanor didn't address it. The wound was too fresh, too deep. "I need to see you," he insisted, a new urgency in his tone. "I need to understand. I need to know why." "Not now, Ethan," Eleanor said, her voice firm despite her inner turmoil. I can't. I need time. I'll call you when I'm ready." And with that, she ended the call, leaving him with the lingering echo of her pain. 3 days later, a package arrived at her door. It wasn't from Ethan directly, but from her next-door neighbor, Isabella Rossi, a kind, elderly woman who often looked out for Eleanor. Isabella handed her the package with a sympathetic look. "Ethan came by yesterday, Eleanor," she explained softly. "He was frantic, asked if he could look around, said he needed to understand. I didn't know what he was talking about, but he seemed so distressed. He found this box." Eleanor opened the package. Inside were copies of all her financial documents, every pay stub, every bank statement, every college tuition receipt for Ethan. Meticulously copied, he had indeed gone through her private things, searching for answers, trying to piece together the hidden tapestry of her sacrifice. As she looked through the copied papers, some forgotten reminders of her hardships emerged. A faded yellow notice from the power company, a final warning before shutoff, a terse eviction notice from years ago, a close call she had worked tirelessly to avert, and then, a hospital bill, almost illegible, from a visit to the emergency room, the diagnosis starkly clear. Severe exhaustion. She remembered it now, a blur of dizzy spells and overwhelming fatigue, dismissed as a bad flu to Ethan. Each document was a painful artifact, a silent scream from a past she had tried so hard to bury for her son's sake. Now, it was all laid bare. Not just for Ethan, but for herself. The moment her phone vibrated, Eleanor answered. There was no hesitation, no need for the time she had previously claimed. The copies of her life, laid bare before her, had steeled her resolve. "Ethan," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You broke into my apartment. You went through my things." It wasn't a question, but an accusation. A ragged sigh came through the phone. "Mom, I know. I'm sorry. But I had to see it. I had to see the truth for myself. I'm a monster, Mom. I'm so sorry." His voice cracked, thick with what sounded like genuine remorse. Eleanor ignored the apology, the self-pity in his tone. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice rising slightly, a tremor of the old pain surfacing. "Tell me why you said those things. Every single word. Don't lie to me again, Ethan. Give me the absolute truth." The silence stretched, heavy and profound, before he finally spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "Cassandra. She told me things. She said you wanted distance. That you felt out of place with my new life, With our friends, with her family. She said you'd be happier if you faded into the background, that you preferred the Hayes family to take on a more prominent role, and that it would make me happier too, to not have to juggle two worlds. Eleanor felt an icy tendril spread through her chest, freezing her breath. I never said any of that, Ethan. Not once. Never. I know, he choked out. I know now, but at the time, I wanted to believe her. It was easier. Easier than dealing with the guilt of feeling like I was outgrowing you. Easier than confronting the truth of where I came from, he confessed then, the words tumbling out in a torrent of shame. He admitted that he had always been ashamed of his origins, of being the son of a janitor and a seamstress. He had fabricated elaborate stories to Cassandra's family, vague tales of a distant, eccentric mother who preferred her own company. He had painted her as independent, self-sufficient, a woman who had chosen her path, rather than one who had sacrificed everything for his. It was a lie he'd maintained for years, a desperate attempt to fit into their world of inherited wealth and polished reputations. The toast, Eleanor prompted, her voice still steady, forcing him to continue. Whose idea was it to thank the only family? Ethan took a shaky breath. Cassandra suggested it, he admitted. She said it would be a joke among her family, a way to publicly acknowledge their support without me having to, make things awkward. She knew I was already embarrassed about my background, and she fed into it. She said it was just a light-hearted way to thank her family, and that you wouldn't mind being omitted because you understood my need to project a certain image. Eleanor felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. Cassandra hadn't just orchestrated his betrayal. She had manipulated his shame, weaponized his insecurities. And the other comment? Eleanor asked, her voice barely audible. The fat pig? This time, the silence on the line stretched longer, broken only by Ethan's ragged breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw, tearful. That was all me, Mom. All me. The champagne, the pressure, the fear that you would somehow disrupt everything. I just wanted you to disappear. I wanted to erase you, to make the guilt go away. I knew if you left, I wouldn't have to see the disapproval in your eyes, or the questions in everyone else's. I thought if I made you leave, the shame would go with you. He paused, a broken sob escaping him. I'd destroyed the woman who gave up everything for me in front of everyone who mattered to me. Eleanor heard his words, the depth of his regret. But one phrase snagged her. Not everyone who mattered. Ethan, she corrected him, her voice quiet but firm. I didn't matter. Not to you. Not enough to be treated with basic human decency. No, he cried, his voice desperate. No, Mom, that's not true. You matter more than anyone. You're my mother. You're everything. Are you? Eleanor asked, her voice tinged with a bitterness she rarely allowed herself to show. Because what you said, Ethan, it didn't just hurt because it was cruel. It hurt because it reflected your true feelings. The shame. The embarrassment of having me as your mother. My sacrifices became a source of humiliation for you. She could hear him sobbing on the other end of the line, pleading with her, begging for forgiveness. But Eleanor felt strangely hollow. The confession, the raw truth, hadn't brought the catharsis she might have expected. It only confirmed what she had suspected for years. An apology, Ethan, she said, her voice now steady, imbued with a quiet finality, cannot fix deep-seated shame. And I don't know if I want to try to fix this. Not now. Maybe not ever. Without waiting for a reply, Eleanor ended the call. She then powered down her phone, the small device going dark in her hand. For 34 years, every decision, every breath, had been for him. For 34 years, she had put herself last. It was time, she decided, to finally put herself first. The silence returned to her apartment, but this time, it felt different. Not suffocating, but liberating. If you're finding Eleanor's journey as heart-wrenching as I am, don't miss a single moment of what happens next. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss the upcoming parts. Your support helps us share these powerful stories. In the rhythm of her daily routine at the dry cleaner, Eleanor found a fragile semblance of peace. The familiar hiss of the steam press, the rustle of clothes, the faint scent of freshly cleaned fabric, these small, repetitive acts offered a quiet solace. Her colleague, Elena Rodriguez, a kind woman with shrewd, observant eyes, often noticed Eleanor's quiet sadness. "You seem a little lighter, Eleanor," Elena would sometimes say. "But your eyes still carry a heavy weight." Eleanor would simply offer a small, tired smile in response. She felt like an empty vessel, a hollow shell going through the motions. Yet the emptiness was, in its own way, a relief from the overwhelming pain of before. 3 weeks slipped by, a silent testament to the distance between her and Ethan. Then, a package arrived at the dry cleaner addressed to her. It was a small, worn photo album, the kind with sticky, transparent pages. Her photo album. Her heart gave a jolt. As she opened it, she found that every page was now adorned with small, brightly colored sticky notes, each one bearing Ethan's familiar, hurried handwriting. The first photograph was of a tiny, mischievous Ethan, barely 3 years old, covered head to toe in bright blue paint, beaming proudly at his handiwork. Beside it, a yellow sticky note. "I remember this day," Ethan had written. "You spent hours cleaning it up after I went to bed. I found you crying in the kitchen at midnight, scrubbing the floor. I thought you were just tired. Now I know you were overwhelmed. I'm sorry I added to your burden, Mom." Eleanor felt a pang, remembering the exhaustion, the utter despair of trying to make ends meet while still providing a joyful childhood. She turned the page. Another photo showed Ethan in elementary school, beaming, holding up a spelling test adorned with a gleaming gold star. A blue sticky note. "You were working double shifts that week at the diner and the tailor shop," Ethan had scribbled. "I was embarrassed that you smelled like cooking grease and thread. I told my friends you were lazy and didn't care about my school. I didn't know you'd worked 36 hours straight without sleep so you could be there for my award assembly. I'm so sorry, Mom." A tear trickled down Eleanor's cheek. He had been embarrassed. She had suspected, but to see it written down, a testament to his childish cruelty, still stung. Page after page, Ethan's notes were a devastating journey through their shared past, viewed through a newly opened lens of understanding. There was a photo of him, a lanky teenager, proudly displaying a dented trophy from a regional soccer tournament. The note: "You missed 3 shifts to drive me to every single game that season, even though your boss was threatening to fire you. You said it was worth it." A photo of his first beat-up car, a gift for his 16th birthday. The note: "I complained that it was old and ugly. I didn't know you had spent 3 months' salary, every penny you had, to buy it for me. You walked to work for 6 months after that, refusing to take a bus." His high school graduation photo showed a beaming Ethan in cap and gown, his arm around a weary-looking Eleanor. The note on this one hit particularly hard. "I was angry that day because you couldn't afford to take me to the expensive restaurant where all my friends were celebrating. I barely spoke to you during dinner at that little diner, the one where you worked weekends. I was such an ungrateful brat." Finally, she reached his college graduation photo, a more recent memory, yet it felt a lifetime ago. Ethan, confident and triumphant, holding his diploma, Eleanor standing slightly behind him, her smile tight with exhaustion. The note on this one was the longest, scrawled with a heavy hand. "This is the day I stopped being your son and started being your obligation. I took everything you gave me and built a new life. A life where you didn't fit. I chose my new life over you, Mom, and I've been choosing it ever since. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." Eleanor closed the album, her hands trembling, her heart felt raw, exposed. The sheer weight of his belated understanding, the painful clarity of his regret, left her shaken. Was this a genuine apology? A true reckoning with his past? Or another calculated attempt at manipulation? She didn't know what to believe anymore. That night, her phone rang. It was Ethan. She answered, her voice still hoarse with emotion. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with tears. "The album. Did you get it? And the documents Isabella sent?" "Yes, Ethan," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. I got them. I found the eviction notice from that old apartment in Austin, he confessed, his words tumbling out. And the pawn shop receipts. The antique locket you inherited from Grandma. Your father's watch. You sold them for my tuition, didn't you? You told me you just lost them. Eleanor felt a fresh wave of grief. Her precious few heirlooms, gone without a second thought, all for him. Yes, she whispered. I sold them. Every sacrifice I made, Ethan, was so you wouldn't have to carry debt, so you could have a fresh start, better opportunities than I ever did. It was all born of love. You keep using the past tense, Mom, Ethan pointed out, his voice filled with a tremor of fear. Loved. It was born of love. Eleanor took a deep breath. She needed to be clear, honest, for both their sakes. I will always love you, Ethan, she stated, her voice stronger now. That kind of love, a mother's love, it doesn't just disappear. But I don't like you very much right now, and I don't trust you. And without those, love isn't enough to build a relationship. There was a silence. Then Ethan's choked voice. I understand, Mom. I really do. And I accept that. But there's more. About Cassandra. There's something you need to know. Cassandra, Ethan began, his voice hoarse. I confronted her. Mom, I told her everything Arthur Sterling said. Everything I found in your apartment. She broke down. She admitted she made it all up. All of it. Eleanor listened, her heart a cold knot in her chest. Why, Ethan? Why would she do something so cruel? She said you were an embarrassment, Ethan confessed, his voice laced with self-disgust. She saw you as a liability, a symbol of a past she wanted me completely separated from. She wanted me to fit seamlessly into her world, their world, and for that to happen, she needed to erase you from my life. He went on to describe Cassandra's methodical manipulation, a slow, insidious poisoning of his mind over many months. She had subtly twisted Eleanor's occasional silences, her quiet nature, into proof that Eleanor was actively pulling away. She'd say, Your mother seems so distant, Ethan. Maybe she doesn't want to be involved anymore. Or, she looks uncomfortable around our friends. You should let her go. It's what she wants. She convinced me that you were creating the distance first, making it easier for me to believe it was what you wanted. Ethan then dropped another bombshell. The wedding toast. Mom. She wrote it. Every word. She told me to thank her family, and to omit you entirely. She assured me you would understand it was just part of the ceremony, a formality for her family's prestige. She said you were too down to earth to care about such trivial things. Eleanor felt a fresh wave of horror. It wasn't just a casual cruelty. It was a calculated, deliberate act of emotional assassination. And Ethan, her son, had been a willing participant, blinded by ambition, and seduced by a world that promised to erase his humble origins. The full, terrifying depth of Cassandra's malice and Ethan's complicity settled over her, a crushing weight. The fat pig comment, Eleanor finally managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. Did she tell you to say that too? No, Ethan admitted, his voice cracking. That was all me. The champagne? The fear of exposure? The desperate desire to make you disappear and stop the shame I felt. It was a moment of pure, ugly self-preservation. I wanted you gone, and I said the most hateful thing I could think of to achieve it. A profound silence followed. Eleanor struggled to breathe, the air thick with the stench of betrayal. Mom, Ethan continued, his voice softer, more hesitant now. There's something else. I found it in her desk. A small notebook. He paused, as if gathering courage. She called it Operation Clean Slate. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Operation Clean Slate? Yes, he confirmed. It was her plan, a detailed, step-by-step strategy to sever my ties with you. She had dates, notes, objectives. Establish that Viola is creating distance, it said. Emphasize class differences in conversations with Ethan. plant seeds of embarrassment about her work and appearance. Wedding day. Make a statement. She had notes about things you'd said to me, about your appearance at previous family gatherings, about what she perceived as your weak points, all to manipulate me into pushing you away. She saw your existence, Ethan explained, his voice filled with a hollow agony, as proof that I came from nothing. She wanted to erase that proof, to sever me completely from my past, so I could be fully hers, fully part of their world. Then came the agonizing confession that truly revealed the depth of his fall. And I wanted to be manipulated, Mom. I wanted permission to push you away without guilt. I was ashamed, and she gave me an easy out, a narrative that allowed me to believe I was doing what was best for everyone, even you. Eleanor could only listen, stunned by the sheer calculated evil of Cassandra's plan and the tragic weakness of her son. But there was still one more piece of the puzzle. The turning point, Ethan said, his voice trembling, was Victoria, my mother-in-law. After the wedding, after Mr. Sterling's speech, Victoria was furious. She didn't believe a word of it. She thought Arthur was just being dramatic, so she hired a private investigator, Eleanor gasped. The investigator, Ethan continued, uncovered everything. Every job, every sacrifice, every pawnshop receipt, every utility shut-off notice. The report was extensive, undeniable. Victoria read it. Then she called me into her study. She held the report in her hand. Mom. And she looked me straight in the eye. Ethan's voice dropped to a near whisper. She told me, Ethan, women like your mother. They're survivors, not successes. They carry their past with them, and it will always drag you down. She's an embarrassment. You need to distance yourself entirely, for your own good, for Cassandra's good, for the good of your future. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. The cruelty was systemic, a disease passed down through generations of privilege. I was horrified, Mom, Ethan choked out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I took the report, stormed into our bedroom, and confronted Cassandra. I showed her everything. And she just nodded. She said, My mother is right, Ethan. She is an embarrassment. We both know it. She didn't deny it, didn't regret it. She just agreed with her mother. That's when it hit me, he said, his voice hollow. The full extent of what I had allowed, what I had become. The woman I married, the world I chose. It was rotten to the core. I packed my bags that night. I left her. I left all of it. Eleanor met Ethan at a small, unassuming bakery on the edge of San Angelo. The aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air, a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere between them. Ethan, looking gaunt and haggard, confirmed he had indeed left Cassandra and was staying in a hotel. I chose wrong, Mom, he stated, his voice devoid of its usual confidence. I made the worst decision of my life. He pushed a small, leather-bound notebook across the table towards her. It was the Operation Clean Slate Journal. This is yours, he said, his eyes pleading. Keep it. It's proof. Proof of Cassandra's calculated cruelty. There are pages in there, Mom, about future grandchildren, plans to ensure you would never even know them, to keep you completely out of our lives. Eleanor carefully picked up the notebook, her fingers tracing the cover. She looked up at him, her gaze unwavering. Ethan, she asked, her voice calm. What do you want from me? Are you here for absolution? To blame everything on Cassandra? He flinched, then met her gaze squarely. No, Mom. I want you to understand the full picture. I wanted you to know that Cassandra was the architect. Yes, but I was complicit. I chose to be manipulated. I wanted to leave you behind. I wanted to shed the shame I felt about my background, about you. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his hands clasped. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Mom. You raised me. You worked yourself to the bone. You built a life for me out of nothing. And I destroyed my relationship with the only person who truly loved me, unconditionally. His voice cracked, tears welling in his eyes. Eleanor listened, absorbing his words, but felt no immediate softening. "Forgiveness, Ethan," she said, her voice clear and measured, "won't erase what you did. It won't erase the years of distance, the public humiliation, the feeling that my son was ashamed of me. It won't erase the truth of what you became." She insisted that he truly understand this. "It's not okay, Ethan. What happened? It's not okay. And it might never be okay. And I need you to understand that I, not you, will decide how this ends. Or, if it ends." He nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "I understand, Mom. I really do. I need time to think," Eleanor continued, her voice firm. "Time to process all of this. And even if we try to rebuild something, it won't be like before. I'm not the same person who sacrificed everything without a second thought. That woman is gone. I put myself last for too long." A flicker of something new, something hopeful, entered Ethan's eyes. "I know," he said softly. "And that's okay. I don't want the old before where I took advantage of you. I want to know who you really are, Mom. Not who you had to be to survive. Not who you had to be for me. Just you." Eleanor felt a strange ache. "Just me," she repeated, almost to herself. "I don't even know who just Viola is. Ethan, I've spent 66 years being a mother, a worker, a survivor, always for someone else, or against something." A question, one that had gnawed at her for years, finally surfaced. Do you regret having me, Mom?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. Eleanor looked at him, truly looked at the man he had become, flawed and broken, but finally, seemingly, ready to see the truth. "No, Ethan," she said with a certainty that surprised even herself. "I never regretted you. Not for a single day. My only regret is that in giving you everything, in making my entire world about you, I inadvertently taught you that I was worth nothing, that my sacrifices were merely expected, not cherished." Ethan's face crumpled. "No, Mom, you're not worth nothing. You're everything to me." "Then prove it," Eleanor challenged him, her voice holding an unexpected steel. "Not to me, Ethan. Prove it to yourself. Find out who Eleanor Vance is without the need to be your mother, without the burden of shame. Find your own worth, separate from the wealth and status you chased." She stood up, pushing her chair back gently. "I'll call you, Ethan. When I'm ready." She left him sitting there, amid the comforting scent of bread, a man stripped bare of his illusions. As she drove home in her old Honda, the familiar streets of San Angelo passing by, Eleanor noticed something profound. There were no tears. Her choices had been made out of love, his, out of shame. The difference was stark, and in that realization, she felt a quiet strength begin to bloom within her. 3 months passed, bringing with them a quiet, unexpected peace. Eleanor settled into a new rhythm, one that revolved around herself for the first time in decades. Her shifts at the dry cleaner were still there, a comfortable constant, but her evenings were now her own. She rediscovered the simple joy of losing herself in books at the local library, the satisfaction of nurturing plants in a small community garden plot she'd adopted, and the companionship of other volunteers at a local animal shelter. Her life, once solely defined by her relentless sacrifice for Ethan, was slowly, deliberately, filling with things that brought her genuine happiness. Ethan, true to his word, had respected her request for space. There were no frantic calls, no unannounced visits. Instead, every 2 weeks, a small, discreet package would arrive at the dry cleaner. One contained a copy of The 5 Love Languages, with certain passages underlined. Another held a receipt for a $5,000 donation made in her name to a charity supporting single mothers. A third included a photo of Ethan himself, looking surprisingly earnest, volunteering at a local food bank, his designer suit replaced by a simple t-shirt and jeans. Eleanor kept them all, neatly stacked in a drawer, studying each offering with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Was this genuine remorse? She wondered. Or simply another meticulously planned performance? Then, one cold Tuesday afternoon, as Eleanor was returning home from work, she saw him. Ethan was sitting on her apartment steps, huddled against the chill, looking tired, but determined. He stood as she approached, his hands in his pockets, his gaze anxious. "Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. Eleanor paused, assessing him. He looked different, less polished, more human. "Come in, Ethan," she said, opening the door. They sat at her small kitchen table, the same table where she had spent countless hours meticulously budgeting, where she had cried over the shoebox of pay stubs. Now, it felt like her space, imbued with her new sense of self. Ethan began to speak, his words deliberate. "I filed for divorce, Mom. It'll be final next month." He explained that Cassandra had shown absolutely no remorse about the manipulative notebook, simply dismissing it as tactics to achieve a goal. She even tried to argue for part of my share of Sterling Industries, claiming it was family wealth, and I only got it because of my marriage to her. Eleanor just nodded, the coldness of Cassandra's character no longer surprising her. Then, Ethan revealed another significant change. "I also quit my job at the corporate law firm." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, surprised. "I realized," he continued, "that I loved the status more than the work. I loved the money, the prestige, the success that came with it, but I hated the actual work. It was all about protecting the wealthy, about perpetuating a system I now see as fundamentally unfair." He took a deep breath. "I'm working at a legal aid clinic now, Mom. It's in the city, but it's different. I earn a fraction of what I used to, but I'm helping people, vulnerable people, people who remind me of us." He shared a story, his eyes alight with a newfound passion. "Last week, I helped a janitor, a single mother, recover stolen overtime pay from her employer. She was being exploited, barely making enough to feed her kids. I thought of you throughout the entire case, Mom, of your long nights, your quiet dignity. I felt like I was actually doing something good." Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable. She acknowledged his choices. "Those sound like better choices, Ethan. For you." She paused. "But they don't automatically fix us. They don't erase what happened." Ethan nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I know that, Mom. I know I can never make up for my past actions. I can't undo the pain I caused, the years of believing I was ashamed of you. But I hope to build something new, something based on showing up, on listening, on being present. Not on grand gestures or empty apologies." Eleanor sighed, the weight of years of disappointment heavy on her. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Ethan," she admitted honestly. "You repeatedly chose status, wealth, and a superficial image over me, over the woman who gave you everything." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes, but this time, they seemed different, not self-pitying, but genuinely remorseful. "I promise you, Mom," he pleaded, his voice thick with emotion. "I will choose you now, over anyone who doesn't see your value, over comfort, over status, over anything. I'll fight for you, the way you always fought for me." Eleanor looked at her son, seeing not just the repentant man before her, but flashes of the little boy he once was, the boy she loved so fiercely. A cautious curiosity bloomed within her. "Okay, Ethan," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'll give you a chance." She laid out her terms, clear and unambiguous. "I need time. 6 months, maybe a year, before we even consider meeting regularly. For now, we'll talk. Not every week, every 2 weeks. And no more gifts, no more money, no more trying to buy your way back in. Your actions, your consistent presence, your genuine effort, that's all I'll consider." She met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "And understand this, Ethan. If you mess this up, if you betray my trust again, that's it. There won't be another chance.